Okay, this is chapter 26 of The Night Singer. 26. Hannah turned back to face the red house. Through the window, she saw Sonia open a kitchen cabinet and take out a can. Inside, the house looked nothing like it had on the one occasion she had been there previously. It was brighter now with more modern furniture. Back then, it had been full of heavy wooden furniture, and there had been an unpleasant smell. Their teacher, Jacob, who lived there, had invited the entire class over for coffee and to talk about God's forgiving nature, though he had explained that in order to be forgiven, they would first have to confess their sins. His words, or perhaps the way he had said them, had frightened some of the children, and there had been a real outcry from the parents. That had brought an end to any future class visits. Jacob should never have become a religious studies teacher. For him, Christianity was the only faith. "Could you drive?" Hannah asked. Eric nodded and took the keys just as his phone started ringing. Hannah knew it must be Ove and considered taking back the keys so that they could get going. But she really didn't think she was capable of driving right now. Besides, Ove might have new information for them, something that was more urgent than going to see Fanny. Hannah climbed into the passenger seat and looked out to the house again. She wondered what had happened to Jacob. It was only much later that she realized he must have had some kind of mental illness. The village could be pretty accepting of things like that, providing it stayed within certain boundaries. But frightening children was not okay, nor was killing anyone. More than anything, it was the gossip that had driven Hannah away from Oland. The way everyone suddenly felt free to talk about the things she wanted to lock away in a dark room. The fact that her father had been killed. The fact that her father had killed. Maybe Christopher was right, and it was selfish of her to have come back. The phone calls she was getting suggested that at least one person was particularly upset by it. The fact that they were calling her work phone wasn't something she attached much importance to. That number was far easier to get a hold of than her private one. Her phone buzzed and Hannah brought up the message from Rebecca. "Will you come to Monklemosen with me?" Hannah stared down at the words. She wanted to say yes, but the car she was in belonged to the Kalmar police. She could always ask Eric to drop her off once they were done, but then she would need to work out both how to get home and how to get into work tomorrow. Her own car was still parked outside the station in Kalmar. She didn't have the energy to go after work, and she also doubted Rebecca would be able to wait that long. O said IT had managed to restore WhatsApp on Joel's phone. Eric looked at her as though he were expecting a drum roll as he started the engine and began pulling away. And Fanny sent 2 messages to Joel on Tuesday. The first was at 2:05. "You're fucking dead. It's you or her." The second was at 3:12. "Come to the woods at midnight." "Let's go and talk to the monster, then," said Hannah. Eric didn't seem to react to her use of Sanja's words. "He also just sent over everything they've got on Fanny," he said. "Seems like she's well known to both us and social services." Hannah sent a message to Rebecca telling her she would be in touch later, that she could go out to Monklemosen with her. Now that Rebecca had actually asked for help, she would have to work it out somehow. She opened the file Ove had sent her. "Turn there," she said, pointing to Snaggaton. Fanny lived just outside of Guardby in Ove Albach. Hannah's phone started ringing as they drove, and she answered without checking who it was, convinced it must be Rebecca. Hearing the silence on the other end of the line, however, she realized she had been wrong. Almost immediately, the silence was broken by the sound of crackling, quickly growing in volume. Something was on fire. Hannah wanted to tear the phone from her ear, but it was as though it was glued to her. She felt Eric's eyes on her, and knew she should pretend to be talking to someone so that he wouldn't work out what kind of call it was, but she couldn't even manage that. A scream down the line seemed to loosen the phone from her ear, enabling Hannah to end the call. Eric pulled up in the yard where Fanny was on her knees, tinkering with her moped. She was wearing ripped jeans and a black t-shirt, and her short hair was black, though the growth at the roots gave away that it was dyed. Was the fire a recording? It must have been, from a film or something, but the pain and the scream had sounded so real. Eric parked right alongside Fanny. She looked up, but then continued tightening something on the moped. According to the files from Ove, she had turned 16 in January. Her previous dealings with the police involved shoplifting, drinking, public damage, and more. There was one case of assault plus attempted fraud where she had tried to trick people out of their money on an online marketplace. Both the police and her school had reported their concerns to social services on multiple occasions. Hannah and Eric introduced themselves and showed her their ID. Fanny got up and held out an oil-flecked hand, grinning when they declined to shake it. Though she was only 16, she must have been at least 5'9". This could have been me, Hannah thought, if I'd reacted to Mom's death the way Christopher did. Unlike Hannah at that age, Fanny didn't deal with her height by hunching. Back in Stockholm, Hannah had hired a personal trainer to help her strengthen her back and shoulders to become better at standing tall. For the most part, she now stood straight, though she occasionally forgot and fell back into old habits. "Are you home alone?" asked Eric. "Yeah," said Fanny, "but don't worry, I can handle talking to you without my mom being here." "That's big of you," said Hannah. The crackling fire and the piercing scream were still fresh in her mind, but she knew she had to let go of the call. She had a job to do. Hannah looked down at Fanny's hands. She couldn't see any cuts or bruises, but that could easily be because of the grease and the dirt. "Isn't it?" Fanny bowed to Hannah. "Lady Brienne of Tarth." "What are you talking about?" Eric snorted. "Game of Thrones." Hannah rolled her eyes. She hadn't seen a single episode of the TV show and had no intention of starting. "We want to talk to you about Joel Forslund," said Eric. "I wish I could say it's sad he's dead," said Fanny, "but I'm not surprised." "Why is that?" "Because he kept sticking his nose in." "Into your little side earner, you mean?" said Hannah. "What side earner?" "Stealing money from children?" The teenager laughed until she noticed their expressions. "That was just a bit of fun," she defended herself. "I didn't need the damn money." The moped was a real Honda, but that meant nothing to Hannah. It was obviously well cared for, and Hannah was willing to bet it was also souped up. She peered around the messy yard. There was a main house and 2 side buildings, a pile of junk in front of one of them, including a broken bed frame and a couple of chairs. An old tractor was parked in front of the other, the same kind that had dominated the countryside when Hannah was younger. "I don't give a shit about your intentions," said Hannah. "You're going to stop." Fanny shrugged. "That's not enough. If you don't stop, I'll see to it that you get locked up." "Fine, chill out, woman." Fanny raised her hand in a salute. Hannah was on the verge of drumming the message into her again, but Eric spoke up before she had time. "You sent Joel a couple of messages on Tuesday," he said. "Yep. Do you remember what you wrote?" "More or less, but I'm guessing you know the exact words." Eric read the messages to Fanny, who sighed. "That was just to scare him." "Did you meet Joel in the woods?" "Yeah," she admitted without hesitation. "Behind Guardby School," Hannah interjected. Brienne here knows what's what," said Fanny, giving her another bow. Hannah felt a strong urge to reach out and slap her. "What did you and Joel do in the woods?" asked Eric. "We just talked," said Fanny. "We convinced Joel to mind his own business." She emphasized the word "we" so that they would understand she wasn't alone. "Who else was with you?" "Lucas and Tilde." Hannah asked for their surnames and jotted down both in her notepad. "Did you use your fist while you were talking to Joel?" asked Eric. "Nope, just our mouths." The way Fanny smiled at her own joke made Hannah realize that the girl was probably coming down from a hash high at the stage where the giggling and chatter transitions into a confident sense of calm. That would explain why she didn't seem the least bit nervous that they were asking her questions about Joel. Hannah studied her pupils. The girl's eyes were so dark that it was hard to make them out. The whites, however, were bloodshot. "Did Joel buy hash from you?" she asked. Fanny hesitated for slightly too long, and during the pause, Hannah finally caught sight of her nerves. "No, he didn't."